welcome to our March lecture. First, we want to start off by thanking TechSource, our sponsor for the 24-25 lecture series. It's because of them that we're able to bring speakers here and that we're able to bring tonight's lecturer, Dr. Timothy Koeth. A little bit about Dr. Koeth. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Materials Science and Engineering at the University of Maryland. He earned his PhD from Rutgers University in 2009 as a student in Fermilab's Joint PhD Accelerator Physics program. From 2013 to 2019, Dr. Koeth was the director of the University of Maryland Nuclear Reactor and Radiation Facilities. Currently, his work includes research on radiation damage studies on neutron detectors. Dr. Koeth is an affiliate of Los Alamos Laboratory and serves on the board of the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History. He has more than 75 scientific and scholarly publications, and he also holds 2 patents and is involved in collaborations throughout the United States. Beyond his physics work, Dr. Koeth is equally passionate about his personal research pursuits, including collecting and preserving early atomic age artifacts, vintage cryptologic machines, and classic atomic-era tectonic oscilloscopes. His historical work has appeared on the cover of Physics Today, as well as featured in interviews on NPR's Morning Edition. From these personal passions, we get his talk tonight, taking the Enigma out of the Enigma machine. Please join me in welcoming him to Los Alamos.
Thank you, Rachel, for that very nice introduction, and thanks to the whole Los Alamos Historical Society team for inviting me. This is a great honor. Not only is it not lost on me, I'm giddy about being in this room and the history that these walls have seen. So it's my honor to tell a little more history in this room. And it didn't dawn on me, but this is a perfect audience to let you know that I run a sanctuary for old 500 series Tektronix oscilloscopes. So, and this summer I'm driving out and back with the big pickup truck. So, all right, so that'll be another talk. So, what this talk is not going to be tonight is an in-depth discussion of how the Enigma was broken or any of that history. There's so much of it out there that I could not do that justice. But what I could do is tell you about how this machine works. And it's actually, that's sort of just not out there that much. If you do enough homework, you can find it. But I thought that was something very unique about this. I learned by doing, and I really wanted to understand how the Enigma worked. How could I create another one? So we're going to go through all of that this evening. I also encourage questions along the way. Please interrupt. So I'm sure everybody has seen one or more of these movies, and you know about the history of the Enigma machine. And it's just popular. Of the 3 big technological advances in World War II, this is probably the most publicly popular. Poland is very proud of their mathematicians that cracked the Enigma, and I just thought this was adorable. Could not. So during St. Martin's Day parade, this Enigma goes marching down the street. A little bit of a primer on codes versus ciphers. A code is just some substitution. So the Dancing Men from Sherlock Holmes is a code where a character represents a letter, and you just put these weird characters down, and if somebody finds this sheet, can't figure it out immediately, but if the message is long enough, you can do frequency analysis, and you can easily crack the code. A cipher uses an algorithm to transform a message into a random, quote-unquote, random string of characters. So this is the Vineray cipher. So let's say the plain text reads, "Classes are almost over." And we're sort of at midterms now, but one can hope. And the key is finals, 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 finals. And here, and then the cipher text you might get then is HTN, SDW, whatnot. So the plain text, you want to encrypt using this algorithm, and you take FIN, and finals, and you keep repeating that, but you say, okay, let's just take the first 3 letters of final. So if you're plain text, classes are over. So you go here, F to C, so C for classes, F for the finals of the key, and you get the ciphertext H. And if you keep going through that, you get the encrypted language. So the sender and receiver have to both have the same sheet. This is actually quite a very difficult cipher to break. But that just gives you a sense of what the difference is between a code and a cipher. That is, in fact, a cipher machine. We'll see that. It is not a coding machine. So if somebody says the Enigma message has been decoded, they're incorrect. It's been deciphered. But I wouldn't get too up in their face about it. All right, so the Enigma machine has a very interesting timeline. So everybody has heard about the Enigma, right? The Enigma, which makes it sound like there's one Enigma. And initially, a German engineer, Arthur Serbius, in 1918, patented his rotor machine, I'm going to say a cipher machine, and he initially offered it to the German military, who determined that they did not need a new cipher system, and they turned him down. They sent him away. So he went and thought about it, and said, hey, this might be really good for business people to cipher their important business traffic that you'd want to avoid industrial espionage or some skullduggery like that. And it really struck out on that too. Then in 1923, Winston Churchill wrote The World Crisis and boasted in that writing, that novel or tome, that the British had broken the naval codes of the Germans during World War I. And quoting it, the German fleet command, whose radio messages were intercepted and deciphered by the English, played, so to speak, with open cards against the British command. So that, he probably shouldn't have said that. This is a good example of poor OPSEC. In 1925, the military purchased then from the Schiffer Maschinen AG, a company called Schiffer Maschinen, that owned the Enigma patent, and at the same time, they cut off supply of these commercial machines and acquired the first Enigmas produced for the German Navy. So in other words, it was no longer a commercial product. It could only be made for the military, the Navy in particular. 1926, the German Navy, introduced the Enigma machine for communications security. So finally, they adopted it. In 1928, the German army heard about the success of the Navy's Enigma and ordered their own, but with improvements. And then in middle of July 1928, the Enigma went into the Army's crypto service. Just as the Enigma was gaining popularity with the military, Arthur Serbius dies in an unfortunate horse wagon accident. But even by 1930, only a few hundred Enigma machines were purchased by the German Army and Navy combined. There was a shipment of an Enigma machine that went through Poland, and it arrived at the post office on Friday. It wrapped up just as it arrived on Monday, but for 3 or 4 technicians, they had a very sleepless weekend as they had very carefully unpackaged this Enigma machine, tried to make drawings of what they had, and sent it away. And the Germans really never found out about that. The German Navy adopted the, so these 3 guys were Rajewski, I practiced this, Rzycki, and Zagalaski. And by 1932, they were able to read German Enigma traffic. The German Navy adopted the Germans' Army's use of a 3-rotor machine with a plug board, but then included 2 more rotors. So rotors 1, 2, and 3 were used to talk to the Army, but rotors 4 and 5 were specifically for Navy-only communications. So as usual, one military service doesn't trust the other one, so they tried to have their own. In 1935, Hitler denounced the Versailles Treaty. The German Navy began to use water-soluble ink for crypto booklets and key sheets. So the minute some water hit this, it just dissolved the ink and made the crypto books and the keys totally erased them, totally useless. In 1938, Bletchley Park, I'm sure you've all heard of that. That's the code-breaking station in the suburbs of London. And if you ever get the chance to visit it, it's definitely worth visiting. UK, France, and Poland conference was held at the UK to discuss decryption of the Enigma. And what happened there is the Poles realized they were in trouble, so they transferred all their knowledge about the Enigma machine to their allies, the UK. The British too then became successful in reading Enigma. World War II breaks out. Poland was invaded in September of 1939. Things were going well at that point for the crypto team. Then the German Navy introduced what became known as the four-rotor Enigma machine for U-boats, and that really threw a monkey wrench in the decryption. They realized that something happened, but I think they even understood that a fourth rotor was put in, but of course they didn't know the wiring of that rotor. And you'll see the addition of one rotor really ups the number of permutations. By 1943, the rest of the Navy adopted the four-rotor machines. 1985, so we skipped ahead a little bit there. I was 10 years old, and I was armed with a library card, and I got a kid's book on the Enigma machine and other cryptologic things, and I was hooked. I similarly got hooked by Richard Rhodes' book, Making an Atomic Bomb, and that set my career forward, but these other books set my hobby forward of these machines. So I said, so I already had this question. Between 1928 and 1945, approximately 30,000 Enigma machines were manufactured. There's some people quote as many as 200,000. So there is a large error bar on that debate. About 400 exist today, and one of them is here today. And I'll give you some more caveats on that. So everybody says the Enigma machine. Well, there wasn't just an Enigma machine. There were many. The very first ones were typewriter-based. That you type in the plain or ciphertext, and out would come the others on a piece of paper. And that was intended for business applications, like banks and whatnot. The more popular one was the glow lamp machines, and this is an example of a glow lamp machine. I won't go through all of the family tree of Enigma machines, but I'll point out a few. So the most popular was the Enigma 1, M1, which that is one of, and that's sort of the unified military service, Army, Navy, Air Force, etc. They had 3 rotors. By 1938, they added 2 more rotors, so you would have an Enigma kit that you could only put 3 rotors in, but you could select from those 5. In the M4, which was introduced in 1941, was a 4-rotor machine. Here's my PhD student, Ariana, and one of my former undergraduate students, Scott. We visited an Enigma enthusiast in Germany, and he had one of the 4-rotor machines. And you notice the plug board is missing here. And that was a real treat to see that. Okay, so that's sort of the history of the Enigma machine. You can find a lot of this online, so I didn't want to waste your time with me bumbling through the history, but I want to really tell you about the hardware. So there are the rotors. These are really the heart of the machine. We'll take this one apart, and we'll see it. So if you could take apart one of these rotors, you'd see that there's 26 pogo pins, and I might as well do that. We'll get to it. Pogo pins, anybody that designs printed circuit boards, you know what a pogo pin is, a spring-loaded brass contact. And on the other side are just solid brass contacts, all symmetrically, cylindrically, or circularly located around a shaft that this would rotate. Some of the rotors you'd see will have numbers on them, such as these, or letters. Each rotor had a number stamped on it, rotor 1, rotor 2, rotor 3, up to 8 ultimately. And you had 26 pins on the input, representing the alphabet from A to Z. And rotor 1, input pin A, is mapped to output pin E. Input pin B is mapped to output pin K. And that's the scramble. And that was fixed for rotor model number 1. Rotor 2 had a different scramble, rotor 3 had a different scramble, but those were universal, generally. They came up with a serial number and the stamp of which rotor it is. I'm holding rotor number 4 there. At this friend's shop where he works on Enigmas, repairs them, he has lots and lots and lots of parts, Enigma parts, gathered throughout his career. And he has bins and trays and whatnot. And here is an example of the rotor, the pogo pin rotor with the German wiring. So this is taken apart. So you can actually see what the wires look like. They're silk coated. Here's an example of a tray full of, he was very excited to pull this drawer out and show me these. But there's always exceptions to the rule. And here you have a standard rotor on the left and a special rotor on the right. Notice that the serial number is 17119S. And S meant that was the special wiring of the rotor. It was intended for the upper military brass to have their own, to be able to communicate very securely and not worry about anybody below them intercepting the message. So it was, again, their own special channel. And we'll see a lot of pictures of the machine that this came from. All right, here is perhaps the most important drawing to pay attention to. I did not make this drawing. I couldn't do it better. This is really well done, and I found it on Wikipedia. I can't stand it when my PhD students get up and give a defense, and I learned this on Wikipedia. And I learned this on Wikipedia. So there's a lamp board, which is probably difficult for most of you to see right now, and then a push button board, which if I press the button, I just press Q, the letter W lit up. So here in their example, they press A, right? I press A, the letter F shows up. These are dual pole single throw switches that are either when if you're not pressing the button, the lamp is engaged in the switch. If you press the button down, you disengage that contact and you engage the contact that is part of the bus for the battery supply. And if we follow the current path, it goes down here, goes to what's known as the stecker board or the plug board, and that's up front here. In this picture, you can see that there are some that are plugged in and some that are not. If they're not plugged in, you do not have the pins pushing on these insulators that push back that plate, which without that just shorts it out. So on the plug board, A is shorted right out, or continuity is brought to A. So we follow A around, it goes up into what's known as the input rotor. Even though it doesn't move, it's still called the input rotor, 26 pins. It goes out what would map to the A pin on there, goes into the first rotor, goes up out of the first rotor into the second rotor, out the second rotor into the third rotor, out the third rotor into what's called the reflector. There's 26 pins, but there are 13 jumpers in the rotor. And then it comes back out the rotor. There's 13 jumpers in the reflector. Comes back out the reflector, wires its way back through the rotors, and then comes out some pin. We don't quite know which one it is. Yes, we do. It would be the S pin. But because there's a wire, one of the jumpers plugged in here, we're not shorting it out. And the continuity path goes through that wire, the red path, to the D pin. The D then comes up, and because we're not pressing that button, it connects up and illuminates the D light. Does that make sense? All right. Yeah, it's actually quite a simple path to follow. The magic is every time you press the A button, the rotor, the rightmost rotor, advances one notch. And then you go into a completely different wire scramble into the next rotor. And as that first rotor goes around, it then, one full turn, at some point, which is adjustable, it will advance the next rotor one notch. So every time you press this button, you're going through a different wiring path. And because it's small, it's sort of unimpressive. of what that path looks like. And I hope to impress you before tonight's over.
And not only that, but you have an option on where the jumper cables are going to be?
You can adjust, yeah, we'll get to that. We'll go through all the settings. So it's a long story. This Enigma machine belongs to one of the supporters of the Los Alamos Historical Society, Clay Perkins. So if you go to the Beta House, you'll see that Clay and Dorothy Perkins, his wife, helped support the restoration of the Beta House. I was invited to his house because of another little hobby of a German uranium cube project. And when I walked into his home/museum, there's an Enigma machine sitting there. And I about lost it, because that was the first Enigma machine I've ever seen. And he was like, "Would you like to see Washington's first sword?" I'm like, "Nah, I want to play with this Enigma machine." So it took a few years to warm him up to the idea of letting me borrow this for a while. And I made the promise of being able to get it going again. His had been underwater for a substantial amount of time, and it was not operational. But so he did. He trusted it into my care for a year, which turned into 3 years, which was nice. And I can tell you that was a whole fun story. But we got it working again. So here it is sitting on my kitchen table, taking pictures of it. One thing that's very interesting, and you'll see why it's annoying, they don't use a QWERTY keyboard. They use a German keyboard, the Quartz keyboard. And so that's what the operator normally would see: the lamp board, the push buttons, the plug board in the front, and then 3 openings where you can see the rotor settings. So again, this is a set of rotors that are labeled in numbers instead of letters. If you lift the lid, you'll see the lamp board. Somebody tried to do a poor restoration job on this. You should not use normal spherical, they're not wheat bulbs, but just little incandescent bulbs. They should be flat and squashed a little bit, because as you push the lid down, it will puncture through the lamp board lettering. There's a cam lever that you pull back. It releases the rotors, and you can pull them out. There's a battery box, which took a really strange German 4-volt battery. And there's a power selector switch. There are 2 binding posts on the front cover here that if you needed to supply an external 4 volts, say from a vehicle, you could do that too. By pulling that cam lever and pulling the rotors out, that's what you would see. There is here are the input pins, the pogo pins. On this side is the output solid pins. There's a shaft that comes out. You'll notice a spring-loaded bar here with a, if you can get your thumb in there, you pull it, and then you can rotate that number ring with respect to the thumb wheel ring. And what that does is sets when the rotor is going to advance, the neighboring one. This is the view of the input wheel, just 26 solid stationary pins. This is the picture of the reflector at the far end on the left side, and it does not rotate, but it does move axially, so you can retract it and pull out the stack of rotors. Notice that this has the same serial number. That's important. That's the other side of the rotor stack. Oh, and this is the advanced notch. In the picture, you can see a sort of a V groove. As you're pressing a button, pawls come up and move advance the rotors. Only once the least significant rotor, or the rightmost rotor, the pawl falls into that groove, which then also allows the neighboring pawl, which is coupled to it, to fall into this groove, which then is what does the mechanical advance. And when you come up here, you can see that happen. There's a wiring harness, all green silk-coated copper wire. And that's the back of the very delicate lamp board, and that's the lid interior. Okay, so that's the hardware. How would this thing operate? There are so many settings in this machine, you had to have synchronization between the sending and receiving stations. So there were a handful publications that were then stapled into a book that were distributed to the radio operator stations. These were considered absolutely top secret. Without this, an Enigma machine is totally useless. You'd much rather the enemy get a hold of this than one of these booklets, because that just gives you your key away. There's some great stories about how a few of these were captured and made it just easy to decrypt. These were made out of that paper that if you got it wet, it would just destroy it immediately, or burn it. Okay. So what it consisted of were the daily settings. Each row was a setting for a particular day. Those would change at the stroke of midnight. They were for 1 month at a time. This is the first day of the month, second day of the month, third day of the month. They started in a ascending order or descending order, depending on how you look at it. And the reason was that at the end of the day, you could rip that up and throw it away. And then you would just eat away at that daily setting sheet. You had the date. You had the rotor selection in order. So remember, we had 5 at this point. We had 5 rotors to select from. So on the 31st of October, you would select rotor number 4, rotor number 5, and rotor number 1, and that's how you'd stack them up in the machine. Then the ring settings. This is where I said that you rotate the number ring on each rotor to advance the next one. What's interesting is you only need 2 of those, right? Because the first one's going to advance the second one, second one's going to advance the third one, but the third one's not going to advance anything. But to avoid confusion of how you set it, they just arbitrarily came up with some number so the operator didn't have to think about it. Let's just set the ring setting to that. It had no impact on the machine's operation. The plug board setting. There are 26 letters in the alphabet, so you could have up to 13 plug board jumpers, right? But they only selected 10. So the way you would read that is K goes to L, I goes to T, F goes to Q, and so forth. Then you had the initial 3-letter starting point, of which there were 4 groups to choose from. Only one of them worked. But in the preamble to the ciphertext that the receiver would get, you would get 3 letters. So if you set everything up just right, you set the machine to one of those 3 pairs, you press in the 3 letters, and then you press in those 3 letters again, you would get the same plain text over. So let's say you got XYZ, and you pick the first one, and you got ABC. If you press XYZ again, you got ABC out again. You knew you had the right one. So there was a little bit of human intervention that was necessary because only one of those 4 would work. Okay. So the settings were changed every day, every week. Oh, initially they were changed once every couple months, and then they get a little more paranoid and every couple weeks, and then ultimately you wind up with every day. And sometimes on the hour, depending on what the message was and the net was being used. Okay, so you had to have 2 Enigma machines, 2 operators. They had to both have the same settings, obviously. They had to be on the same frequency. Morse code would be sent via the sending station. It would go through the ether. Any ham radio operators in this room? Okay, good. I'm going to put you to your Morse code test soon. And then the receiving end would hear this Morse code and write it down, set the machine up properly, and that was no easy feat. One of the things I hope you walk away with the impression is how difficult it is to actually set this up. But also, while this is going on, Bletchley Park is listening and writing down a bunch of scrambled letters, and they don't understand what's going on. So here's a couple photos of them in operation in the field. Picture on the right has Goring, I believe. And notice that each of these have 3 people standing. Each of these photos have 3 people standing around the machine. One person reading off the plain text to be pushed in, and then another person to read off the lamp board to a scribe who's there. Try doing this all by yourself. It's really tough. So it really does take a couple of people to operate this thing. And then, of course, with the boss standing over your shoulder. And not just any boss, pretty mean Nazi. So here's a vintage Collins receiver that you might expect to see put in use And here we go. Let's see if this works. Can you guys hear that? Okay, very shortly, I'm going to plug this ciphertext in, and the lamps are going to light up. And I don't write that down, so it's your job to keep track of what the message is. I'm looking for the Y. All right, what's the message? Not drink Ovaltine. Was anybody able to follow it and put it together?
Please send more Diet Coke.
Please send more Diet Coke. Correct. Just in time. Thank you. I practiced that. Yes, sir.
Knowing what I know of vintage electronics, how reliable were the contacts?
Good question.
Did they have to service this machine to get the right message?
Yes. So it is not uncommon for a lamp bulb to be burnt out or a contact to be crunchy, and you just had to be really good to keep track. If you lost track of a letter, you had to at least put a blank space in there and just keep going. So in the big context, you might be able to figure it out. So if you saw SEN, more, diet, CO, you say, okay, you know what to do there. But if you didn't pay attention to those gaps and you just ignored it, then after that first missing letter, everything else would be scrambled. You just could not recover from that. One thing I wanted to point out to you guys, sorry I skipped over this. Oh yeah, the bottom picture here, and it's not coming through well on the monitor. This bulb is filled with water because this whole machine was submerged in water for a while. So there's a little air bubble there, and so that is a World War II North Atlantic Ocean water. Okay, so some of the combinatorics. What made this thing make the Germans think that it was impossible to crack? Well, some simple math. You had 13 pairs of possible plug board holes to put wires into. And you can figure that out by a bit of combinatorics math. I won't drag you through that. It reduces nicely to 26 factorial over n factorial, 26 minus 2n, quantity factorial 2 to the n. That's a whole nother hour lecture. But if you tabulate this, if you have 0 jumper cords engaged, then you only have one configuration. A goes to A, B goes to B, all Z goes to Z. If you just have one wire that you can then randomly put in, and the way to think about it is if you put the output in A and you want to go to B, you've already taken A and B out of the possible configuration. A is out. So you can't go from A to A with plug board wires. that number of configurations rises extremely fast to 200 million configurations at 11 jumper wires. It actually unintuitively starts going down with an increase to 12 or 13. And that's a whole nother story. Interestingly, where you'd have the maximum number of configurations just from the plug board, the Germans decided to only instrument it with 10, which got 150 million permutations. And I don't know what the reason for that is. But that's still a staggeringly large number. That's going to change every day. So one of the things you had to do is figure that out, what the plug board configuration is. What they did know was that they were going to use all 10 every time. So that reduced the, if you on one day would only use one, on another day you'd use 3, and another day you'd use all 13, it became something like 500 million. So establishing the number of permutations or configurations for the plug board, now you have to select 3 rotors from the 5. It's a little easier math to go through. It's 5 pick 3, so 5 factorial over 3 factorial. Factorial means 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. 3 factorial is just 3 times 2 times 1. And that turns out to be 60. So there are 60 unique configurations of how you would put 5 rotors into that, 3 rotors out of the 5 into that machine. All right, so that's only 60. Then there's the ring settings. And that's 26, so you can adjust it to 26 positions. And even though there were 3 on that daily setting sheet, only 2 of them have any impact on the machine. That's why it's 26 times 26, or 26 squared, which I know is 676. And then rotor settings, because you had an initial rotor setting for each of them, 26 positions each, now that's 26 cubed. And if you put all those together, the number comes out to about 1 times 10 to the 23. So that's 1 with 27 or 23 zeros after that, which is a staggering number that you have to push through. And in the later machines, I think we were just discussing this, where you could have 8 rotors, all uniquely configured, and you employed theoretically the highest number of adjustments to the machine, unique settings, you could get on the order of 1 times 10 to 114 configurations. There's only 1 times 10 to the 80 atoms in our universe. So you couldn't even have a computer because there's not, yeah, anyway. It's a huge number that in theory should be unbreakable. So we're going to do a demonstration. I need some volunteers from the audience. 4. Come on up. Yeah, everybody, 4 of them. I see Nick raising his hand. Come on up, Nick. I see the other Nick raising his hand. Come up, Nick. And then this gentleman here. What's your name?
Dave.
Dave, okay. And your name?
Wayne.
Wayne. So, can I pull you out of your seat, Nick Lewis? All right. So I'm going to put the microphone down here. Can you hear my voice back there if I'm just shouting? Okay. All right. Use the mic? Okay. Okay. All right. So one of you, I have to advance to. One of you is going to write down the rotor positions. Now, we're sort of at a handicap. I only brought rotors 1, 2, and 3. I left rotors 4 and 5 at home. So who wants to select the rotor position? Okay. Yeah, you'll all get a chance. Okay. So your job is it going to be 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1 or 2, 1, 3, etc. Okay. Someone has to select the ring settings of both rotors 1, 2, and 3, and that would be 3 letters of the alphabet, 3 random letters. There you go. I need somebody to select the initial rotor settings. So again, that would be 3 letters. Select 1 letter from the alphabet 3 times. Okay. And then, perhaps the most daunting task is to come up with the secret message. Don't make it too long. Yeah. All right. So let me know when you're all ready. And then ultimately, I think I'd ask for, when this part is over and it's encrypted, I'll ask, and I need a couple audience members to be the scribe. So as we press the buttons, we're going to read out the lamp board, which would be the ciphertext. And I volunteer Bob here to be the scribe here. And then I'll need one more volunteer, because the machine will be set up, to press the buttons and read them out, and then see if we get the same message back. And if this seems like an ordeal, it's because it is. I really want to strive to home how difficult this is to operate. And we're in the comfort of Fuller Lodge. We're not 20,000 leagues beneath the sea. We're not getting bombed. We're not rocking in a boat. It's a very, what's that? Not yet. We're not at war. That's correct. Okay, so let me, this is what you had to do. Open up the machine. Pull the cam forward, which releases the compression that I'll try to put the microphone here so you can hear me, on the rotor stack. The rotor stack is springy, so I got to push it all together. Pull it out gently, not to bend any of the pins. And it's a little tough. Okay. Almost. Put it sort of upside down here. Okay, almost there. There you go. Okay, so there's the rotor stack. I'll pull the pin out. I'll do it over the cloth here so I don't drop one of these on the floor. And they just slide off like that. 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
Could you move to the side of the table?
Yeah, okay. So, all right. So, Nick. Yeah. These are the rotors that you've selected in the order that you want?
I think so.
So, 2 will go in the most significant bit part, then 1, and then 3. So, 3 will go on the rod first, 1, and then finally number 2. Okay, so that's setting number 1. Who had the job of coming up with the ring settings? Okay. What are your ring settings?
X.
Okay.
A,
X,
Q.
X, A, Q. So this is hard to do. There's a thumb peel here. So X, what is that in a number? So luckily, they determined 24. Yep, there's a map in here, so you didn't have to really think it through. X is 24. So we'll set the ring setting to 24. And you notice that the thumb wheel is not moving. Rotate it. And then that pop pins in here, and there's a little red, that detent that falls in there has got a little red notch, so you can see that it's set to 24, and it locks. So that was rotor number 3. Then the next one was A, okay? Which, that one's easy, that's number 1. And that snaps in there, make sure it's good. All right, so that's number 2. Okay. Then your last one was Q. Which I have to use the cheat sheet here. 17. We rotate that until that lines up with 17. Okay. And then we put that on. And it's a little embarrassing. I put the rotor shaft in backwards, so we'll just get the stack correct. All right. Put it in the other direction. It is asymmetric. There's a stop on the end of this rod, so it does matter. And then it just falls into a cradle on both sides. Yeah. Okay. So they're all on there. What's that?
The heater doesn't work though.
So you see it's a little springy from all the pins. Squish it down, and then retract the reflector, it's in, it's seated nicely, and then push the cam forward, and it pinches it. And then you'd want to make sure they fall into each of the detents. Okay, for those of you that are up here, you press the button, and you can see the light lighting up and a little mechanical pawl that advances it. All right, so the internal settings are done. Let's close it.
So that's done every hour or day or whatever?
Yeah, at every shift change, whatever. So it was generally once every 24 hours at midnight. Okay, because of for the sake of time, we're not going to adjust the plug board here, but we still need the initial rotor settings, which.
That's me.
Oh, that was you. Okay.
And so we just put in,
Yeah.
so be
So.
a 4,
Okay. Yep.
7,
4, 7,
13.
13. All right, 4, 7, 13 are the initial plug board settings. Okay, now it's Nick's turn. Nick will, without you guys looking, he'll press slowly, so I can read it off to you. He'll press in the plain text, and then Bob Darlington over here, he's going to scribe down the ciphertext that comes out. Also, I'll shout the numbers out, and if anybody else wants to write it down too. All right, so.
All right.
So it's press Z, W, C, Charlie, L for Lima, L, C, X, Y, G as in golf, Q, K, H, D as in delta, O, L. Okay, thank you. So that's the message. So if we took that plain text, that ciphertext, and we pressed it in right now, it wouldn't work, even though all the settings. Because you got to go back to the original, which I'm glad that you. 4713. So I'm glad you remember that.
I was gonna say, what happens if you mistype, you have to just start over?
You really have to start over. And I gave a demonstration of this on Sunday night to 2 former CIA folks, and it was a husband and wife team, and the wife made the encrypted message, and the husband was decrypting it, and he missed one, so I had to start all over again. That was a good example of how delicate this system is. Okay, so would you like to enter the
Sure.
So you have the cipher text. You don't know what the message is. Bob is going to reset the machine to 4, 7, and 13. Okay, and of course we didn't change any of the other settings, so the machine is ready to decipher it. So, do you want me to read the letters to you?
Sure.
Okay.
And I'll read out the.
Someone else shout out the letter. The light board lights up. So the first one is Z,
D.
and
Okay, I'll say it. D.
second ciphertext letter W,
R.
C,
I.
L,
K.
L,
Y.
C,
O.
X,
U.
Y,
R.
G,
O.
Q. All right, we have a dead bulb. So put a blank in there. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
I say okay.
Yeah, sorry.
A.
H,
L,
H again,
T,
D,
I,
O,
N,
L.
E.
Anybody figure it out? Drink your Ovaltine. Perfect. So, I had stifled my laughter when I saw it. Okay, congratulations. We've gone through the full cycle. Drink your Ovaltine. with no spaces, and we missed a letter because one of the bulbs didn't light up. I suspect it's the A. It's drink your Ovaltine. Yeah. Great. So that was cumbersome, right? That was a lot of effort. It took 6 people to do that. And traffic was going around continuously by many stations. Okay, but again, I wanted to impress upon you how challenging of a machine that was to operate.
So I presume it had numbers also.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. It did not have numbers. So you'll see an example right now where if you wanted to say 9 or 8, you had to spell out 9 or 8. Yeah. No spaces. So, all right, this is a perfect question. So, and anybody know of the KPH station off of Point Reyes in California? And it's now the Marine Radio Historical Society. Once a year, they do an Enigma challenge where they take an old message and they send out the ciphertext, and you can receive it and try to decrypt it. So it just so happened that myself, our friend Jimbo, Noah, and another ham radio person in our family, Larry, we took on this challenge. Here's my home station setup, and I won't make you listen to the whole thing, but I want you to hear part of the Morse code transmission. Well, I won't drag you through the whole thing, but the Morse code would fade out. You might lose 5 characters. And what do you do? So you know it's sending at a good operator will send at a very fixed cadence. So you can say that should have been a letter, that should have been a letter. So you just put a blank, 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 and then it comes back out of the noise. And hope that you haven't missed one. Because if you missed one, it's over. We tried receiving this. It was in Maryland. And the band conditions were poor. We heard it and then it just went away for too long, and then it came back. So the station operator said, why didn't you use one of the remote software-defined radio receivers that you can go to a website and listen in California and you capture it all? That's not the point. But would you mind sending us a recording of it? And they did. And that's what you heard. You heard the recording of a very high-power transmitting station in California, let alone in Maryland. We didn't think to record it in Maryland. So the sheet on the right, in the black letters, you can see that they did come in groups of 5. So V, I, S, F, P, C, V, C, E, J, S, N, Q, D, E. So if you got the right letters, you go ahead. Okay. At the very top of that page on the right, you see DBK, WSE. If you set the machine right properly, you would get NIY out as the initial rotor setting, so that was sent as would have been done in the real field. And those numbers are 14, 9, and 25. Then as you put in V, you get F. You put in I, you get an O. You put in S, you get an R. And it was force D2SU, BMERG. So you still had to then look at the string of letters and figure out where to put the space in manually.
How do you get the rotor settings without the rotor settings? I don't see it. What
So-
setting do you have to be at initially?
So what they sent, if I remember correctly, were the letters DBK, and they gave us a specified date from this particular antique sheet, and we were able to then set the machine up correctly, which I believe was NIY. Okay.
So you had to have a machine in order to
So there's, well,
decipher.
you had to, and if you did, you get a very special certificate. Turns out we were the only group that entered with original equipment, therefore it was easy to win that certificate. 170 other people participated, And there are software emulators. I have an emulator on my phone. I have a MATLAB emulator. And if you put that plain text in there, it comes right out. So 170 other people correctly deciphered it.
Okay, wow. I've heard many hammer operators, and I have to admit, my first lesson to take a no code is to see what I'm doing. Say that it's like a language to them now.
Yes.
So a bunch of random characters might be much harder to interpret than an actual string of real words.
Yes, that's a really good point because you can hear the word the. You don't hear THE. And these are coming pretty slow. Those operators would send at like 25, 40 words per minute, which you do start hearing language. That's a really good point. So it was difficult to decrypt random. So random set of letters coming out. This is what Gordo and his tapes would do to us as we were practicing for Morse code. Oh, what's his last name? Gordon?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, these four people, Noah, KF7USG, Larry, W2LJ, Jim, AG2E, and Tim, K0ETH, won this competition. And it was so stressful, we never did it again. Okay, so one slide on cracking the Enigma. You can't give this talk without just saying a few things. So it obviously was not as impossible as it seemed to be. One of the biggest quoted vulnerabilities of the machine was that a letter could never be encoded into itself. And I should have pointed that out when we looked at the schematic, because when you press, there's a couple just proofs of caveat emptor or empirical proof. If you press the A button down, you disengage it from the lamp. So there's no way that A light could light up. So if you press A over and over and over again, A will never light up. But the other way, you could, in perhaps a more intuitive way, is that they're on the input board, and you press A and comes out that A pin. It goes through the stack of rotors, goes into the reflector, comes back through the stack of rotors, but goes into one of the other 26 pins. So it's got to be anything but A, and then same for B. So that was a huge vulnerability because our language isn't a random set of letters, but they're very clumped grouped letters. So, and every day, like clockwork, the Germans would send out something called the weather report. So you knew somewhere in there was the word weather report. And if you have the cipher text, you slide it back and forth and you say, well, it can't be this one. It can't be this one because E never turns into an E and T never turns into a T. So all of a sudden, that really removes a bunch of combinations. It brings it down to like 1 million combinations. All right. The user randomly selected 3-letter starting positions and double encoded it. So if you want your initial letters to be ABC, you put them in and then you set the machine to XYZ, put ABC, and then you encode ABC again. That tells you something about 6 sequential letters. And so the first letter and the 4th letter are exactly the same. The 2nd and the 5th letter are going to be the same. That was a huge advantage also. And this happened every day. Then there were words that they called cribs. So you saw weather or Heil or whatever. You know that they were going to be in there. Then instead of using random letter groups, they'd use their girlfriend's name or the family member name or somebody over and over and over again. That's a huge human error in cryptography. Then one of the ones that I really enjoyed the most, when they were really having a hard time decrypting it, the Allies would create some sort of kerfuffle somewhere, set off a huge explosion, just benign, but other than a huge explosion in the vicinity of a German ship. So they knew the grid square, they knew the time, and they knew that this would be a significant enough of event to be reported, and they would look for that in that day's messages. So that helped a lot. So, okay, that's all I'm going to say about the decryption because there's lots of stuff, including people using modern computing technology to decrypt Enigma messages. All right, I told you I like to do things I learn by doing. So I wanted to make something that we then called the T-Enigma, or Tim's Enigma. And it's an electromechanical emulator. A MATLAB code version of this is just not going to cut it. I needed to see things moving. So let's understand it a little more. And this is ultimately what I wanted to get across today. How complex that little machine is because of the rotors. Each rotor had, each rotor's got 26 pins going in and 26 pins going out, right? So, and all of them have to be engaged because there's some random path that you're gonna hit the reflector and come back. So you need all of them to be connected. So in one rotor, let me be a little careful here. You have 26 ins and 26 outs and they map. So if you wanted to create a circuit board with this, you need a planar array of 26 relays by 26 relays that you could selectively turn on. So that's 676 relays. If you go to Marlon P. Jones surplus store, which is going out of business and at a 40% discount right now, load up. You can get relays, but at $1 a piece, it's still $676 worth of relays to emulate just one interface of those rotors. And there's 4 interfaces. There's from the input rotor to the first rotor, first rotor to the second rotor to the third rotor, and finally the third rotor to the reflector. So that's a pretty expensive idea, but I really wanted to do this. And then after you have your relay boards that you can select, you have to do the wire scramble. So you have to have the internal wire scramble. So if the first setting, you'd have A in go to A out on the board, B in go to B out, but then if you advance the rotor once, then A in is mapped to B out, B in is mapped to C out, and of course Z in is mapped to A out. Does that make sense? And that's every time you rotate this. You go through that. Noah, my very brilliant graduate student, said, well, you don't need a, he really did suggest this. One of these uniselector switches or stepping relays. And the way it works is a solenoid on the bottom here. And when you give it an impulse of current, it advances like clockwork. A sweeper, so there's one input here and there's 26 pins on the way out. And that would represent one letter. And then, of course, you need 26 rows of this to make one set of contacts. So I'll pass this around. Try not to bend the pins. We'll actually use this in it. But if you want, press this tab on the top of the solenoid, and you can see the mechanical advancement of it. I remember going to Hamfest as a kid, and there was lots of these. And I just passed boxes of them on eBay. They're like $150 each. So this is not going to be a cheap project any way you slice it. So here's a schematic of how that works. And our friend Jimbo, he made a circuit board to take a TTL signal in and to advance the rotor. I'm hitting it with a 10 hertz pulse. And you can see how it mechanically advances. The next job was to do a little bit of soldering. This particular one was 26 by 8 individual sweepers. And in order to get that shift, we had to put a diagonal set of bus wire from pins across it. But there's only 8 contacts on this. We need a total 26 plus one more to do the advancements for 27. So we stack a bunch of these up on a 19-inch rack panel. A lot more soldering. And you can see there's a rotation to it. So some of these had to then come off the rotor pins and work their way back up to this end pin. It's not soldered up yet for that. Here, okay. And then these 2 barrier strips. I can't believe how expensive barrier strips have gotten in the surplus market. Here's the rotor scramble. So there's A in to A out, and then you go through the fixed scramble, and then this bottom row here represents the reflector. So we have this panel here represents just one set of sliding contacts. We'd have to duplicate that 3 more times to get the same functionality of that stack of rotors. This is how many hours of soldering? So it's partially completed. It works well enough if you keep the message short enough. You can make it work. It only goes around 26 times before it would replicate itself. So it's not that strong of an encryption machine, but it gets the point across. And the whole setup, there's the board. We push buttons for the input, a lamp board for the output. For the plug board, I use 1/4-inch stereo phono jacks, Skillcraft SK16, that when you plug it in, it disengages it, otherwise it shorts it out. So it has the same functionality as the plug board on that machine. And here's a quick deciphering text, S, E, and there's that D. More Diet Coke, so that's the theme. Okay, and that's really a fun thing to, I couldn't bring it out here. I brought it to a colloquium at Maryland, and people are very excited about that also. But it's neat, right? It shows how much real estate, or how many linear feet of wire you need to get around to a rotor system. And that was really an ingenious way of doing that. So there are a few things I'd like to recommend if you're further reading. The Hut 6 story by Gordon Welchman. He was a direct peer of Alan Turing. But everybody knows Alan Turing's story, and probably nobody's heard of Gordon Welchman. He got incensed that this guy Winterbottom in the late 70s published a book called The Ultra Secret, because they thought it was, they were taking the whole Enigma cracking story to the grave. And then Winterbottom blows the story, but he gets it all wrong. But, so, all right, he said, well, all right, since it's in the public domain now, be this a lesson. Gordon Welchman takes all of his notes, writes in this fantastic book, very historically accurate, how the machine worked, how it was decrypted. After World War II, he went on to work for MITRE. So he came to the United States. He worked for MITRE, and he devised another decryption scheme, just looking at network activities, even if you couldn't decrypt the message, to get a lot of information out of it. He talked about that. He had a high-level security clearance, which then made him very unpopular in the community, and he lost his job. Obviously, he lost his clearance. He really died a broken man. But this book really captures it well. So it's out in the public now. I do believe everything has been properly declassified at this point. And then these other books are good, more or less accurate historical reviews. So if you want to read more about it. Okay, a few acknowledgements. I wanted to thank Jimbo. He's sitting in my shop soldering these bazillion wires. And then Noah, also in the shop, running those wires and winding them around. When he first came to Maryland, he moved into the house next door to me. I asked him to help me with that, and then he moved promptly after that, about 30 miles away. And this is the machine that I got working for Clay Perkins. Again, a massive supporter of the Los Alamos Historical Society. There I'm with his now late wife, Dorothy, holding the safing and arming plugs, one pair from the Hiroshima Little Boy bomb, under his perfect 1-to-1 scale of Sputnik. And he's an amazing character. So I wanted to thank him. He actually wanted to come here tonight, but he felt he was not up to the trip, so he's invited me to visit him at home, and I'll give him this in the comfort of his living room. So thank you for your attention, and please come up and play with the machine. And if your questions, yeah.
So, there's 2 things. This would be a good talk to give to the Vice President, the National Security Advisor.
You're filling up my lecture circuit here. I do live in the DC area, so.
Be their only form of communication with themselves.
Anyway, but he said one of those books got it wrong, and I couldn't tell. Was that the Ultra Secret?
Yeah, the Ultra Secret. There are inaccuracies in it, I should say. It's not completely wrong.
I mean, it mentioned, because I read that about 40 years ago, and it mentioned about, I think, the Poles stole a machine from the Germans or something.
That is correct.
You know, that is true.
They borrowed it for a weekend.
Yeah.
And they were unaware of how generous their sponsors were.
But was that significant? I mean,
Oh, extremely. Because then they at least had the machine. And the point of the Enigma machine was to show that if you know the wiring, you can build one. And in fact, the Americans had a emulator of the Japanese purple machine, which could easily be emulated with stepping relays.
Is this completely unpowered, like a manual typewriter?
To advance the rotors, yes, that is, you had breakfast and they give you enough energy to push the buttons. The only thing that does have electrical power is to light the bulb up, and that's a little 4-volt battery, which is made up of three AAA batteries, so it's like 3.5 volts.
So, in the beginning, I probably missed it, but, is the Enigma based on the original patent that the very first guy filed that he could never sell, or was it engineered based on that patent?
That's a good question. I haven't looked at the patent itself, and don't tell anybody because my wife's a patent examiner. The concept of the rotor had to have been in there. I don't know if it was a 1-to-1 scale for a rotor, but I would say the inventive art of the rotor was in there. I hope so. But now I have to go look at the patent.
How many machines were there with the 8 rotors?
I don't know. Not very many, I would suppose. Probably measuring in hundreds to 1,000. But that's just the intuition I have from the frequency of the other ones. And you, and then you, sir.
I assume that when messages were being sent to a specific machine, to a U-bug or something, there would be then open message traffic associated with it. You can't possibly decrypt all the messages you hear. So there must have been something that directed a message to a machine.
There were what were called networks. And so they would be from point to point. So there wouldn't be a map of every receiver with a line to every one of them, because you're right, it would just be impossible. So there were a network with a handful, a manageable number of stations, and they had call signs. So there was a preamble of a plain text. So there would be a call sign. In fact, I didn't show you, actually. I told you about how we decrypted it, but I didn't actually show you what the message was. It was an actual historical message that was decrypted. I repeat it down here. Forced to submerge during attack, X. Depth charges, X. Last enemy position, grid AJ9863. And you can see 9863. I had to spell out the numbers. But there is a call sign, and somewhere, crypto message follows, BT, which is sort of a break, Donits from looks. And this was a famous message. 2013 Zulu, October 27th break, 100 break, BBKY. That was the plain text to help crib to get the right day code. The 100 was a character count, so you could make sure that you got all of them. So there was some plain text associated with it, which would typically include a station's call sign from and who, so the operators were listening. So, and those were the only ones that were decrypted. So if that was your station, you copied it and you decrypted it. You didn't worry about the others. I think there's that gentleman.
More of a general question, and maybe I missed it, but so how many of these machines are still, or have been found is my one question. And then you talked about the chart changing at midnight. Was it done at Zulu time like everybody does now?
I believe it was, I'm not going to give you a 100% solid answer, but I believe it was German, whatever time zone Germany was in at midnight. I believe that was the case. It could have been Zulu, but I'm not 100% sure on that. How many still exist today? There's the online Enigma Museum and a few other in the community track it, and they have a master spreadsheet that has about 400 on it now. But every so often, another one's added because they find one in somebody's attic. One turned up a few years ago at a garage sale. It was a 4-rotor Enigma machine. Somebody said they were selling it for like $30 because they thought it was an old typewriter. That person did a little bit of homework and figured out it wasn't a typewriter, and they sold it on Christie's auction for like $800,000. So that's a good investment. And then there's a question right there in the shirt.
How rapidly could a skilled team encrypt a message and send it and vice versa receive it, like in words per minute or whatever measure they used?
I do know that they got very good and very fast at it, and they it wasn't I wouldn't guess 20 words per minute because of such the manual, but I would guess about 10 words per minute. Our team here has a little bit of catching up to do, but it was a long day. We're tired, so, but yeah. So.
Did the Germans ever figure out that it was broken?
No, I don't believe so.
Somebody made a statement to me once that the Battle of Bulge, they didn't use the machine.
I'm not aware of that, so no, in fact, so much so that several major planning events occurred that if, in advance, if the Allies had been there to stop them, that would have tipped them off, hey, they're decoding this. So they let the disasters happen. And I can't think of the name of the ship that went down. It's a
Bombing of Coventry.
Coventry? Okay, thank you.
Oh, that's.
You mentioned the Japanese purple code. Did they have a similar machine?
I don't know that any picture of their actual cipher machine exists. It is similar in the sense that it was a stepping type of encipherment, but they had, and they may have actually used telco equipment for that, but they separated out the consonants from the vowels. And there was some complicated scheme that they had. So was it electromechanical? Yes. It was breakable. It was probably comparable to the Enigma in complexity. But it probably carried the same features, such as it could not encrypt its own letter, same letter over, excuse me. But again, I'm not an expert on that machine. The Swiss came up with a machine called Enigma, which was NE for new and MA for machine, new machine. It was inspired by the Enigma. Somewhere late in World War II, the Swiss were independently decoding the German traffic. And a professor and another electrical engineer designed a machine that's called Enigma machine. It was being designed from 44 to 45. They froze the design, I think, in 46, so obviously it wasn't ready for wartime use. So they manufactured a bunch of these machines called Enigmas, and there are 3 versions, one for business use, one for training, and another one for wartime use only. And those wartime use only machines were stashed away in mountain caves that the Swiss made, as the Swiss do. And recently, as of 1990 or so, or 95, they obsoleted that and they sold them surplus. So there was a bunch of Enigma machines out on the market. And that's a neat machine. It's a rotor machine. It has a reflector. There's 10 rotors, though. And not every time you press the button, sometimes all the rotors will move. Sometimes a few will move. Sometimes a few will move more. It's a very complicated scheme. And, but it never saw actual practical field use. All right. Oh, sure.
Did the Soviets successfully break German ciphers on their own, or did they rely on Allied intelligence?
I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, I'd like to know that.
We're told that we broke the Japanese codes, we're told it saved however many months. We're told we broke German codes and saved however many months, and so on. I've never heard anything, discussion about whether anybody ever broke our codes.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So there's a machine called the Sagaba.
Everybody much more knowledgeable than me has the answer.
What's that?
We said yes.
Yeah.
So who said yes?
So just to comment, the Germans did break some of our common military cipher machines. They had their own, it's very different than Enigma. But one of the machines that broke was the machine type, I emphasize type, that was used for secure communication from Los Alamos back to General Groves. There's no indication that one was broken into, but it was a type of machine they had successfully attacked.
Do you know the type that it was?
What's that?
Do you know what type of machine that was?
I'll send you the
Oh,
PowerPoints.
yeah, I'd love to see that. There's a machine called the Sagaba, and that was used during World War II, and it was even used in Korea, I believe, possibly Vietnam. That was a rotor machine, and it was never broken. At least that is the belief and story that the folks at the NSA have. There's no evidence that it was ever cracked, and that was it was a rotor machine that was a little more sophisticated, and also the Germans were unaware of the effort that the UK and the United States were putting into breaking the Enigma machine, so they never even thought to try to break the US. I mean, at least that's the story as I understand it. There was not an effort to do that.
Pardon me, I was more interested in the code breaking operation that would occur daily, presumably daily at Leslie Park in particular. Did they have one machine, but their job was to figure out at the beginning of the day what the various settings on the rotors
Were
they. How would they go about it? You started to discuss vulnerabilities in the code, and I was trying to imagine the daily operation at Leslie, how they would use the vulnerabilities to presumably come up with the rotor settings.
Right. So it was a process. There would be the intercept stations that would write down the ciphertext, decode it, and each sender had a signature to the Morse code. So the receiver operators would actually begin to learn the personality of the senders. So you could tell that. So in there, they knew that that particular sender would use a certain language or certain words routinely. So that gave you a bit of an advantage using the vulnerabilities that we already talked about. Then they would go through this alignment to there were various sheets that they would punch holes out, which would at Bletchley Park, and where there was a coincidence of a hole through all three sheets, light would shine, and that would narrow down the range of potential rotor settings. It didn't give them to you, but it narrowed it down from 1 times 10 to the 23 or whatever, down to about 1 million. And then there was other hints along the way, and I can't tell you all, I don't know what they all are, but then they would put them into what they called bombs, and it was basically 20-ish Enigma machines with 3 rotors all in one machine, and they would run through and figure out they had preset outputs that when they found a rotor configuration that would give you that, it would stop, ring a bell, and they'd write that down and give it a try. And this automated the decryption process enough that they became quite routine at getting it. But it wasn't always successful. There were days that there was no decryption, and then there were days that it happened so fast that the whole Bletchley Park process happened so fast that the Bletchley Park readers, and then they would send it up to their military advisors, would be reading the decrypted message before the German receivers would. So they got quite proficient at it. Some of it was just luck of the combinatorics of it.
All right, time for one more question. All righty, well, thank you all for coming tonight. Let's give it up for Tim.